Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Tonya Surman to talk about a really interesting concept about co-working and community financed buildings. Tanya, welcome to the show.
Hi, Alex.
So as we were talking about superheroes and all that good stuff, I was wondering if you could share your superhero origin story.
Sure. I'm one of these people who has been working in nonprofit organizations my entire life. I started my first nonprofit organization when I was 19 years old. It was called Earth Shoppers. I was going to shop to make the world a better place, and that failed. And so that was interesting. That was my first experience with failure. I've then subsequently been involved with dozens, literally over a dozen nonprofit social purpose organizations, from first commercial internet service provider in Canada that was actually a nonprofit social enterprise, funnily enough, and then was instrumental in leading an initiative called the Canadian Partnership for Children's Health and the Environment, that whose work led to getting the ban on BPA in baby bottles in 2008, and then going on to do some miraculous other work on sort of toxics in kids' health, and have been a part of many organizations, from helping to create the Ontario Nonprofit Network, and of course the organization that I'm the founder and co-founder of, and am still leading, which is the Center for Social Innovation, where we then support hundreds of other social purpose organizations. So kind of I don't know about hero, but I've never really been very well accepted in the rest of the sectors of the world. So the nonprofit sector got me. Here I am.
I'm just curious because Earth Shoppers, you said it failed. What kind of shopping could you do on it? Was it products?
Oh, you think that there was the internet? Oh, ho, Alex, this was before the internet existed, back in the 80s, when we thought the only way that you could convince people to do anything was to do flyers, and you would you would print out a flyer, you would educate somebody, and then you would go through a whole process of distributing flyers to people into local communities. So this was back in the 80s, and the internet was still in a DOS-based interface, and the exclusive ownership of our academic institutions and military establishments. So when the internet came around, that was a whole next level of thinking. It changed the game for everyone.
Yeah, good old days. I reminisce about them sometimes.
Mhm.
Okay, so today, mostly about the Center of Social Innovation. Can you tell us a bit more about the story behind it? Why did you decide to start it? What does it do? High level stuff.
All that kind of stuff, sure. So the Center for Social Innovation is a nonprofit social enterprise, and it came together over 20 years ago as a small group of us who were like, how do we get the nonprofit sector to share? Like, it was just such a simple concept. It was like, like, how much is a photocopy lease? Like, for a photocopier, it's like $500 a month for a photocopier lease. And there was some new information at the time, which was saying things like the nonprofit sector is 85% small organizations of, budgets of less than $1 million and less than 5 staff. And so it was this real understanding that there were many small organizations all trying to do something a little bit different, whether it's women's health and the environment, or it was, a TTC riders group. I'm based in Toronto. Or it was, policy advocacy, education, healthcare, anti-racism, social justice issues. It didn't really matter, but they were tons and tons, thousands and thousands. And one of the things is, because they're so small, they had no way of actually creating efficiencies and effectiveness. And so really, CSI was an initiative. Our first step was like, how do we create efficiencies and effectiveness by creating shared spaces where we can share things like photocopiers and fax machines and kitchens and a meeting room. And it was like a very practical problem that we were trying to solve. And so we did that. We created a 5,000 square foot space in partnership with Margie Zeidler at 401 Richmond. She created a space for us and allowed us to, and really was a co-founder, to help us to experiment with what would happen if we brought arts groups together with international development, with environmental organizations, and so on. And it was in that very, very early stage back in 2004 that we created this new product called virtual tenancy. And virtual tenancy, later named co-working, was this radical idea that, maybe people didn't even need an office. Maybe they just needed their laptop, which at the time was quite large, and their cell phone, which weighed a metric ton, and they could come in and they could they could check in to a desk. They could do hot desking. So we were really, really early. Actually, we were the first co-working space in Canada. And it was and arguably one of the first in the world. They coined the term co-working in San Francisco in 2005. So, this was, and there was an amazing group called Citizen Space that was experimenting with these ideas there. And so basically what happened, it was this crazy idea. What would happen if we shared? And in 2007, we had kind of proven our model enough with this 5,000 square feet that there was a lot of interest in what we were doing. And so we took over another 13,000 square feet and opened our doors to 150 organizations almost overnight. And so what was happening there was just this moment in time, 2007 to 2010, where there was just so much energy in the term social entrepreneurship and social innovation, and this idea that we might share, that we might actually bring hope and possibility to the world, that we might, align not just how do we get along around the fridge management, how do you manage the science projects in the fridge, but if we put people in the same space, might they start collaborating on other projects? So how do you get arts organizations to take on environmental greening projects? Or how do you bring together folks from law and start doing work on climate change? And so this was what CSI was really all about. It was this question of, could we create a physical space, an offering, which we've later now called co-working or collaborative workspace? Could we bring in, through the power of purpose, could we convene, organizations and people who are doing incredible work? And when we put them together, might we see synergies and creativity and collaborations emerge? And in fact, that's exactly what happened. And that's sort of our personal history starts in 2004. And then we expanded in 2007. And then we bought our first building in 2010. And that was, that takes us onto the story of community bonds. So why don't I let you ask me a question about CSI, and then we can launch into what we did next.
Strong feeling that a lot of terms get used more commonly when they're just very easy to use. Mm-hmm. Like when Blu-ray came out and there was HD DVD, I have a sneaking suspicion, and I don't know if this is warranted or not, but Blu-ray won, I think in part because it was just easier to say than HD DVD. So virtual tenancy sounds great, but co-working is just a lot easier off the tongue.
Right.
So I give you credit for it, but I understand maybe why that didn't catch on as easily as, or the reason why co-working did.
Strongly agree. Strongly agree.
I like the idea, the initiative of being able to, because this theory of cross-pollinating, we can call it maybe, ideas and resources, it works even at a social level. Like I don't remember offhand if I can refer to any particular source, but they say they generally want, when you're building a town or a city, you generally want low-income housing scattered around the rest of the community, because it's that interaction, that interracial reaction, interclass, intersocial interaction that actually helps the community grow together. There's usually less racism, there's more acceptance, and it's an important part of building a healthy overall society. So it's kind of similar in that vein, at least to me. My initial ear is thinking about how we can combine law, let's say, as you said, in climate change. Maybe there can be some cross-pollination that ends up doing some good, and I'm happy to hear that it kind of worked. Can you tell me a bit more, maybe just a small success story along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really about diversity, right? I mean, I think one of the things that we knew intuitively was that that when we did that, facilitate that cross pollination, that magic would happen. But it was really interesting going in. Like this is again back a long time ago when brands were still thinking that they could only have one. They could only have one brand on a piece of paper. Like even the idea of co-branding was a radical idea. And so the kinds of projects that we saw emerge were all over the map. Oftentimes, they took root in events or some sort of like gatherings of some sort. So we actually hosted something called Open Everything back in those early days, which was really about how do you bring, open source thinking together with, technology together with like social need and what might happen there. And ironically, the fellow who led that charge was my husband at the time, who's now the CEO of Mozilla. So just goes to show you a little open everything can lead to great change in the world. But, we also saw, phenomenal excitement. A lot of relationship between environment and arts organizations. That was sort of the environmental movement was still quite nascent. Arts were much more establishment. But we also saw a huge growing movement around diversity and inclusion. And that's always been something that's played a really a powerful role at the Center for Social Innovation. So one of our founding members was the National Anti-Racism Council of Canada. We also had the Chinese Canadian National Council and the African Social Development Council. And those three grounding partners or members really like grounded a whole bunch of the culture at the Center for Social Innovation for years to come. The program that ultimately led out of that was something called the Community Animation Program. So one of the things that we've done at CSI is we've supported over 1,000 community animators through our programming to support as volunteers, if you will. It's an exchange program where people who are either looking for volunteer opportunities, unemployed or in transition, corporate burnouts, new to Canada, are looking to kind of ground in networks, and so they'll come to CSI and they'll get trained up in how to do this work that we do, which is you don't just put 2,000-3,000 people into a building and think that they're all going to just get along or that they're going to do things. And so what CSI has done over the last 20 years is really honed a practice that we call community animation, which is how do we welcome, how do we engage, how do we convene, how do we support our members to do the kinds of collaborations that we sort of see emerging. Examples, we host regular things called Salad Club, where you each bring something to co-create like a salad bar together, and you eat and enjoy lunch together. We do bagel bonding, coffee chats. We have socials that go on. WeWork has done a lot of this. People kind of have the image in their head. We were doing it well before, but ours was always around social purpose. So our motto is people and planet first. And the question is always, how do we model the world we want? And how do we kind of demonstrate what's possible through doing? And as a result, the commitment to diversity and inclusion and a commitment to really bringing people who might be marginalized, unable to pay the membership fee in our social enterprise, we still have them there. That's sort of fundamental to who we are and what we do. And that's led to some just amazing culture, amazing community, and people come for the office space and they stay for the relationships that they build.
Awesome. So CSI is also renowned for launching this 100% community finance building via bonds. Mm-hmm. For people who aren't familiar with community bonds, how do they differ from grants or from bank loans?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for asking. Look, the community bond is something that didn't exist until we created it in 2010. And really, it's very, very, very different from a grant. It has nothing to do with grants at all. It is a loan. Essentially, what happened is this. In 2010, our business model was very successful. We were generating a good return as a social enterprise, and we wanted to expand. And the first thing that I did is I was looking at buildings. I was like, wow, we could have a community here and we could have a community here. And what happened was I called the bank. I found a building or two. I called the bank and I said, will you give me a mortgage? And they hung up on me in like 10 minutes or less. And they're like, yeah, no, I'm sorry. You have no collateral. You got nothing. I said, but listen, I've got these desks. I've got this antiquated phone system. You don't want it? They're like, yeah, no, no. So what was interesting was I was like confronted with this really fascinating challenge. How does a nonprofit get access to capital? How do we get access to financing? And I knew that sensed it was going to be hard because even just opening up a bank account back in 2004 for a nonprofit took me 6 weeks of begging a bank to actually open up a bank account for us. I was like, I had $12,000 of checks in my purse. I'm walking around with these checks that say to the Center for Social Innovation, and nobody would open the bank account. So when I got to actually wanting to buy a building, they were so dismissive. It was pretty shocking. So I was like, well, this is ridiculous. Like, how did other nonprofits do it? And I knew we were small, blah, 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 blah. So I talked to the Canadian Alternative Investment Cooperative, who gave me some advice. I got really getting my head around community economic development thinking and what was possible there. But what happened in the end was that I went to the city of Toronto and I said, would you give me, I heard about this crazy thing called a loan guarantee. And I went to the city and I said, would you give me a loan guarantee? And the head of economic development said, do we do that? And I said, oh, yes, Mike, you do that. And so I was able to convince the city to see the kind of economic value that we were bringing to the city by creating a hub for social enterprise and social innovation in the city and small businesses. And I was able to, the city council agreed to give us a loan guarantee, and that shifted the dynamic with the bank fundamentally. With the loan guarantee, I could go to the bank and the bank would then give me 75% of the projected value of the building. So I wanted to buy basically a $5 million building, 36,000 square foot building in downtown Toronto. And the bank would give me 75% of the projected value. So the projected value, if I did a whole bunch of beautiful renovations, would put us up to say, let's just say 7 million. So the question though was, so the bank basically gave me the first 5 million, but I still needed to come up with the last 2 million. So the question is, how do I do that? What's my strategy? And that's where several of my colleagues have said to me, Tonya, if you can turn your social capital into financial capital, then I'll be impressed. And I was like, I don't see why not. I'll just go to my friends and ask for loans, just ask them to loan me the money. It had never really been done in that way before, but the churches and religious institutions and educational institutions had been buying real estate forever. So the question was like, how do we do it differently, and how do we do that within the law? And so my co-conspirator, I had two incredible fellows who helped me. Scott Hughes, who was working with Van City Credit Union out in BC, and Brian Eiler, who is one of the kind of foremost lawyers and thinkers behind sort of the community bond idea. We kind of co-created this idea of creating a community bond that would be secured against the value of the building and would offer a rate of return. So the community bond is an actual investment where citizens and community supporters can invest their dollars, put $10,000 in. I give you a rate of return, say 5%. And what happens is over that period of time, I have access to that capital. I can generate with that capital the revenue that generates enough to pay for my operations and then pay you back for that loan. All of it is secured against the value of the building. So it's a very, very simple concept, but it was a radical idea that we might go to a broad community of folks to help us to buy real estate. And so we successfully put the deal together. In under 5 months, we went from idea to ownership. And we were able to secure 60 community-based investors that allowed us to buy a 36,000 square foot building in downtown Toronto.
How did you find these investors? Are they people? Are they major gift donors? Or would you categorize them as major gift donors, or just basic people who just want to invest and diversify their portfolio? Was it a corporate as well? What did the investors look like?
Mhm. At that time, the words impact investing that wasn't even a term. This is 15 years ago. But so I went, first of all, I went to my board. Like that was my first stop. I was like, hey, board, if you want to do this, you're going to have to put some cash in. So every single one of our board members at that time invested. So that was number one. The second thing is we went to our mailing list. Like we had about 10,000 people on our mailing list at that point. And it was amazing who rose to the surface. I actually had this one woman who came in and she was just like, I put out a call. I said, "Hey, I want to do this thing called a community bond. I want to borrow your money." And I got lots and lots of response. So really, the community really did rise to the occasion. She grilled me. She had a one-on-one. I met with everybody during that period. You have to know, like everybody, knocking on doors. And by the end, she grilled me for like an hour and a half. She asked me the toughest questions any investor has ever asked me, and then she pulled out a $200,000 check from her purse. It was like mind blowing. So I'll never forget that. But we also went to foundations, and they were really excited and interesting because, they have these capital funds, and those capital funds are not the granting arm. They're the ones that are making the money in order to do the granting. And I was basically pitching them to say, would you, invest? And they were kind of baffled by me at the time, right? Like, well, we grant. And I was like, well, I'll take your grants. Like, I'll take your grants too, but I really want access to the capital fund because I want to show to you that we can make money together. And it was a very different power dynamic, a very different invitation to be a part of things. And a lot of them were very scared. They were very concerned that somehow it would be offside the CRA rulings. And of course, they're fine to invest in extractive and exploitative enterprises all over the world. That's no problem at all. But to actually invest in something that's locally minded, that is offering some sort of decent rate of return. So what happened? It was one. I convinced one guy, Bill Young, our first investor, and once Bill had come in, like the other CEOs kind of got on side. It was kind of fun. So the first time it was very much the people we knew, but we replicated the model again to buy our second building in 2014. This building was right at Queen and Spadina. It was twice the size. And what happened with the demographics of the investors was just amazing. And it's such a great story. First of all, we went from 60 investors to 360 investors. And those investors were overwhelmingly 60-year-old plus women. So there was just this wild phenomenon where, yes, we had the impact investors and the foundations coming on side again, but it was sort of like women, older women who were coming into wealth in this wealth transfer in a new kind of way, saw and understood this investment opportunity. I think they're quite nervous about, well, this is not true, of course, entirely, but I think if you are not familiar with the finance world, the opportunity to invest in a building in a community that you can walk into is kind of awesome. People get it. The other thing that we saw is we saw a huge number of new Canadians coming in. And I did some earned media. I got some great coverage in the Toronto Star. And I had this fellow who had who is an immigrant from Africa, who I got him on the phone and he says, I like this investment. This I understand. And so he put $50,000 in. Like it was just like an amazing story of those people who don't feel as comfortable in the mainstream financial markets, feeling at home and comfortable and understanding what their money can do when they invest it into a place. And we've been so pleased, so pleased. And the latest bond raise, I'll just say, there's a new phenomenon happening, which I just love. Gen Z girls, women, Gen Z, 25-year-old women, I'm telling you, they're the new investor base. Who knew? It's been fascinating to watch them really stepping up and taking positions in our latest raise. So I think there's something beautiful about who chooses to invest in the community bonds. And it's, yes, we do it for money. Yes. And we also do it to show them and demonstrate that when they invest their dollars in the things that they believe in, that they're building a circular economy. And, I referenced Earth Shoppers at the very beginning, and in many ways, the community bonds is better than an Earth Shoppers. It demonstrates in practice when we put our money towards our values that we can create amazing things in the world. So, yeah, we're very, very pleased. We've never missed a payment, Alex. We've been at it for 15 years. We released the loan guarantee from the city, which was absolutely critical for us in the very early days. We released that after 5 years, and we've now raised, well, it'll be a total by the end of this raise, it'll be $8 million. That has helped us to leverage over $45 million of real estate assets in downtown Toronto, and now we are just about to. We're very, very close to selling our first building, and using the proceeds of that sale to pay off the mortgage on our location at Queen and Spadina. And that will enable us to be mortgage free and to be 100% community financed. So we're very excited about the way that has completely, created a physical space in downtown Toronto that is truly community guided and here in service to social purpose and perpetuity.
Hey, Alex here. I want to take a brief moment and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode so far, please consider sharing it with someone who would also benefit from its insights. It's these kinds of referrals that really help the show grow. You can also show your support by making a small donation. I don't do corporate sponsorships or product placements, so I rely on your support to keep the show going. You can visit my website, agentsofnonprofit.com, and click Support Us in the top menu. Thank you kindly. Common theme that the most difficult challenge is getting that first investor, first person to bite in. And I'm happy you mentioned Bill Young doing that. I don't know who he is, but I took note.
Yeah.
And the idea is that, once someone else no one wants to, typically, not many people want to be the first.
No.
There's a sense of insecurity there, uncertainty, not really sure what you're getting yourself into. So to have someone take the chance with you and your idea is awesome. And then it doesn't surprise me that, it's a cascading effect that other people follow shortly thereafter. Yeah. I'm curious to know because that is it often is, let's say, the first one is the critical turning point. What do you remember anything in particular that you shared with this individual to make them understand, to see the vision? I get the idea of what you mentioned earlier about the gentleman who initially or new to Canada was able to invest in it because he saw it. He was able to walk into it. It was a concept he understood. Was it something along those kinds of lines, or did you have a different kind of way of sharing your dream and the art of the possible with Mr. Young?
Mm-hmm. Bill is also a social entrepreneur, and he I think thrives on new, fresh energy as much as I do. So we see there was sort of just like a couple things that were, I think, notable. One is I crafted the vision. I wanted a lot more money from him than I got. So I went in with my initial ask was like $500,000, and he came back to me with 150. Now, it was interesting because in that moment, I didn't realize, but he was actually setting the price for the other foundations, right? So that was fascinating for me to kind of go, oh, okay. But the other thing that was really important, and I didn't know it at the time, how important it would be, the woman from Cake, Beth Coates, who was like hard on me, like super hard on me, but like so good, an accountant type who'd like rip me through the shreds and at the end go, yeah, I think you can do it. But she had done the due diligence on the project. And because I had such a person who is so into the nitty gritty of the analysis of the viability, as soon as I told Bill that Beth had reviewed the package, he goes, oh, all right, then she's been hard on you, right? It was just an interesting moment. And I didn't know him, but I didn't know him well at the time. But I think that there's something about being infectious and being, wildly optimistic. Like at that time, and Mike Williams was another one. He was the guy who shepherded the loan guarantee through the city. And he said to me, he just he's listening to me pitching, and he says, uh, "You've got the energy of a David Pico. I'll give you anything." Right. And so it was just an interesting moment of kind of I just, there was something energetically aligned, and I was talking to other entrepreneurs who wanted to see good things happen in the city. And I found in my own journey around the bonds, I've been raising money for the bonds for 15 years now, off and on. And it's getting harder because we're seeing more institutional committees and decision making bodies. And as the field becomes a field, it becomes less responsive to the individuals in the ecosystem. And it's been harder, to be honest. I think in some ways that 2014 raise was probably the easiest. We raised, I guess it was like $3.5, $4 million in something like 3 months. Our fastest raise was like 90 days. And right now we're in the middle of a raise. It's we're raising $6 million. We've already raised five, and the last million is always the hardest, right? It's always the hardest. But we've gone to institutional investors, and they're like, "Well, you have to do this checkbox and that checkbox, and go through this committee and go through that committee." And I'm like, or I can reach out to people who care, and I can say, "Hey, minimum investment, $1,000, for a 4.5% return. If you put in 50,000, we're going to give you a 6% return. That's double what a GIC is going to give you. This is a great investment. We've never missed a payment. It's secured against the value of the building. The building's worth 25 to 35 million, depending on which year you ask. And what we're doing is we're modeling the world we want. We're building a circular economy. We're putting people's money to work doing good. It's just got such an easy sell for people who would otherwise do philanthropy. And this one's like, it's like this really interesting intersectional heartstring, right? It goes, oh, my mind and my heart both like this. Okay, I can do this, right? It's like,
Yep.
and sometimes if people come in too heavy on the mind, they forget that this is really a heart thing, But anyway, that's I obviously am sold. I'm also an investor. It's like the hair product. I'm heavily invested, and so I promise that it'll always be protected.
One thing I noticed too, because you mentioned that Mr. Young put in an investment of 150,000 and it set a precedent. That's also very commonly known in the sales world. It's anchoring.
Yeah.
When I was doing peer-to-peer raising recently for the Canadian Cancer Society, the first donation made was mine, and I put it $200. And most people then matched that, right?
That's right.
I'm convinced if I put $50, they would have put $50 as a stat. Like, you set the bar with the first amount. So just want to call that part out.
So true.
Moving forward, so once the building is up and running, like, is there anything that you do, or what is it that you do to make sure that it stays, with the same kind of energy and familiarity and accessibility and DEI? How do you make sure that those concepts stay fresh or stay relevant or stay in focus, as the building is being used and where it goes forward in the future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the work, right? Is keeping things fresh. Before we got on this call, I'm doing a renewed program vision for the organization. We're moving our focus from social enterprise to more solutions, and how are we amplifying positive ideas as opposed to the kind of negative, bad news that's we're bombarded by in the world. And we're constantly focusing on that renewal. I mean, that's the work, right? Is trying to understand, how do we keep people happy in the physical spaces, but then how do we help keep them collaborating? And certainly animation is a key piece of that, but program vision is also. And we're in the middle. We've been through hell. I'm not going to lie. Like, the last 5 years, COVID has been the impact of COVID was devastating on us. One of the reasons we're selling one of those buildings is because of COVID, and then the spike in interest rates have been had a huge impact on us. And so, we are in a phase of massive consolidation. We went from 80 staff down to 18. We went from a budget of 12 million and four brands down to one brand and 4 million. And so we're operating very much like a small business, but really honing in on what's important. And real estate is just a container for relationships. And so our work is very much about how we're continuing to foster the relationships that the world needs. How do we foster the collaborations and build the connections and connect people to the solutions and to the ideas that are changing the world? And over the last 20 years, we've played an instrumental role in building a number of networks. So the Ontario Nonprofit Network. We're also the founder of Social Innovation Canada, which is a national network that's building the social innovation practitioner space. We've been involved in art organizations and health organizations and you name it. But at the core, I guess CSI is very much I've learned a new term, something called the Collective Intermediary Organization, a CIO. Have you heard of that, Alex?
I have not.
Yeah, so this is new. I literally learned it this morning. And I think CSI is a CIO, a collective intermediary organization. And so when you're the platform, it's really like your podcast, right? You're the platform. I get to bring the energy, right? Or the next person gets to bring the energy. And so that's also true of our members, right? We've got members coming in and out, and whoever joins us is the newest energy that we get to relish and play in and savor and co-create with. And so, and we have a board and we have members that tell us what they want, and we have accountability and budgets and all the things, all the things.
It's so CIO. It sounds, if I'm using my tech words, it's like a platform.
Yeah.
Right? You're giving people the Lego blocks, and then you see what they build. That's basically one way to say it.
Yep. 100%.
How easy do you think this is to reproduce in other cities? And have you ever tried it, or are you encouraging people? Is there lessons learned that you're trying to share off with other organizations to replicate it? Or is this something that you just intend to keep in the Toronto area?
So we expanded. We opened in New York in 2012. And we also opened in Regent Park, also in 2012. We went through a period of intense growth between 2010 and 2014. We went from one location to like 5. It was insane. And what I've learned is that nonprofits don't scale well. I've really learned. And if I could change anything, and I know we're on a nonprofit podcast, but I would have done it as a for-profit, Alex. It's been so difficult to raise the capital. I need to create new financing tools. And it doesn't scale particularly well because there isn't enough money in the model in order to incentivize growth. And so you're constantly using funding dollars in order to subsidize the community pieces. And so it's been a really hard lesson for me as the co-founder, and what's the right model for this mission. And when WeWork came in and all of the other co-working spaces, they basically proved that with a for-profit model, it can be done much, much, much more easily. Now, they have not got the purpose. They don't have the community animation. They talk a good game. They don't have the sort of social innovation lens, but they did figure out how to replicate the model. And, another organization that has done an amazing job at a much smaller but also bigger level is something called the Impact Hub. And the Impact Hub is a global network of so while we're at our biggest, we were 150,000 square feet and about 2,000 members organizations. We're now about 750 organizations. And, but when we were bigger, we were constantly having to find new funding in order exterior outside funding in order to keep the model running. And we were constantly balancing all of these different projects. And it was, I'm not interested anymore. I think I got caught up in the neoliberal agenda of bigger is better. And now I want better to be better. So I'm kind of like small is beautiful. I'm going back to Schumacher and kind of saying, um, the Impact Hub did an amazing job. They had at one point, I think it was 80 locations all over the world, like little, co-working spaces for social purpose. They were amazing. Many of them are dead now. I mean, uh, COVID was devastating for many of us. We closed our doors for 2 years. We lost 55% of our members during that period of time. And then interest rates doubled. And the interest rate increase on my mortgage, just the increase was about $600,000 a year. So we've been struggling to stay alive in Toronto. Several of our nonprofit real estate colleagues, Sketch and Artscape, no longer exist. They closed their doors. So ownership made a huge difference for us, right? If we didn't own the buildings that we bought, we would not be around today. It's actually the increased value, and even in a depressed market, the increased value of those buildings that will enable us to continue to thrive. And so there's some deep learning around the power of ownership, some deep learning around, how one matches the mission and the model and the money. Like, how do you put all of those together? And yeah, I mean, and now we're in this really interesting process of I'm really exploring this idea that I heard called exit to community, which is a fascinating idea of like, I think I got about 10 more years in me in this, in this job, maybe. I don't know if they let me. But this question of like, well, what would community ownership, not community financing, what would community ownership look like? And what might we be able to do to actually make the member a shareholder or a co-owner? So I'm kind of exploring things, and I don't want it to just be like one member, one vote, and representative membership, because so many negative stories about that, and I'm not convinced that democracy is all that perfect. And so I'm kind of like interested in some sort of duocracy, like how do you bias ownership? How do you tie ownership to a bias for leadership in social purpose work? Anyway, I'm all over the map. Maybe too many big ideas, but I hope that answers your question a bit.
Because that was actually one of my questions was, where do you hope to see things going in the short term future was one of my next kind of questions. So community ownership is interesting. It sounds like you need to develop or want to develop a new type of economic system as along the way as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been working on trying to radically redesign capitalism for my whole life. I'm making some progress, but it's pretty marginal, I'd say. And I think I'm losing. So besides that, I think it's fine. But I do feel like there's something about taking as nonprofit leaders, we shepherd missions, right? Our role is to support these missions. And we have this incredible opportunity with the assets that we do have to think differently. And I think too often in the nonprofit sector, we just do what the books tell us, and I just don't think it's good enough anymore. I think there's an incredible opportunity for us to leverage the resources that we steward and to take the risks to do things differently because the world's burning.
So leaning back into that superhero theme, if you had a magic wand or a superpower that could change anything that you would want in this space, what would it be?
Shareholder ownership. Which is pretty big. But I mean, we're talking about redesigning capitalism. Shareholder ownership. I think we have a real problem. We have become disconnected from where our money is being invested. And I don't believe that that's what most of us want. And so I personally feel like So much needs to be done in the world to if we're going to continue to have shareholder ownership, we're going to have corporations that exist in the world. We're going to have to find ways of balancing power so that rivers and mountains and ecosystems and groups of humans have voices in those kinds of conversations. I'm very interested in the purpose economy work, the well-being economy. We can call it 1,000 different things. Um, but yeah, no, I think we need to. Buckminster Fuller said, you don't change a system, you create a more beautiful one that works better, and it will ultimately replace the old system. And so, that's what the community bonds are about. It's what CSI is about. It's about us decentering money and recentering relationships and figuring out how we are able to move from. You're familiar with the first and third horizons in the social innovation thinking. So
No.
this concept's very simple. It's like we're in the first horizon. It's like our current reality is where we are right now. And we have this vision, sometimes we have this vision of where we want to go. And that's the third horizon. And often what happens is we get stuck in the second horizon trying to get from 1 to 3. And we haven't quite figured out how to problem solve our way to get from 1 to 3. We get stuck in 2. And so, in my magical world, of possibility, it's about all of us looking at how we can redesign the things under our own management in a way that models the world we want. And for me, shareholder ownership is one of those things. I mean, I think everything you need to know about how to build a better world, we learned before kindergarten. And it's quite simply, what if the circle was our primary design principle for everything we built? What if we, made decisions in a circle? What if we, understood our garbage systems as a circle? What if we understood how we hold our relationships as a circle? Whether it's, material systems or human systems or relationships. And right now, we are building things in the shape of a pyramid. And everything, goes up to the top. And until we redesign every single decision we make into something that's not transactional, but that's actually relational, that's the only hope I think we've got. What do you think,
And
Alex? Did I
yeah,
just
this,
sound like a weird conversation topic?
no, I'm thinking I got a whole bunch of thoughts and I'm looking at the time like we need another hour to go through some of these ideas. Um, but I want to
Sorry.
respect your time and the listeners as well. So maybe we we can just I'm kind of caught here because there's all kinds of things that are coming into my brain, but at the same time stick to the one topic at hand.
We can always do this again, Alex. It would be a delight. It would be an absolute delight. But I do think, just look, CSI is a circle. And we are a circle and a community. We've created our community bonds in the shape of a circle. We're giving back and it's coming back. It's healthy and renewal. It's regenerative. If we can build regenerative designs into everything we do, wow, what a beautiful world this would be.
I definitely agree. I think things are too linear. Oh, you said pyramid, I was going to go linear. Just, we use it like, just thinking about fast fashion, how we just buy things, use things once or twice, then throw them away. And then it's in a garbage landfill for the rest of time. Like it's just such a short-sighted way of seeing the world. So I do like, and I subscribe to your circular vision. In the meantime, though, maybe we can just, you could share some of the ways that people can get in touch with you.
Sure.
Because there's, at the beginning again of a conversation, people hopefully will have some questions for you or want to reach out to learn more about CSI. But where can they contact you?
Check us out at socialinnovation.org. It's exactly what it sounds like, socialinnovation.org. Join the newsletter. There's lots there. There's information about the community bonds. Buy one. It's great stuff. It's a great investment. And if anybody wants to find me, I'm Tonya, Tonya, at socialinnovation.org. And I love hearing from people. So I'm also, I don't know where else I am. I was going to say I quit X, I quit Instagram, I quit everything. So I don't know. Email.
That works. Tonya, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you so much for doing what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Thanks for sharing and being such a great podcast.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.